Welcome to week 9 of Built with Purpose. This week we're going to turn our attention to the book of Judges, chapter 6 and 7. We're going to focus and reflect on the character of Gideon. This week's focus message is strength in weakness. So, quick overview about Gideon. When you read the book of Judges, it is literally a book of the time before Israel got its first king. Now, there were many judges like Samson and Deborah and others who were, enforcing God's law and leading the way and fighting battles through strength. I think Samson is probably the most popular or familiar name when we think of the judges of Israel. The reason why we're going to focus on Gideon is because God likes to take the things that are weaker and make them strong. Or he likes to take the things that the world throws away and he gives it so much purpose and meaning. And Jesus said, the first will be last. So I'd like to think the way the world works, sometimes God likes to flip us upside down. And there's no better story to draw inspiration from than Gideon himself. To understand the significance of this lesson, we have to first put in context who Gideon was. He was the most unlikely of heroes to represent Israel in battle. And at the time, the Israelites were being terrorized by the Midianites. Gideon himself was from the clan of Manasseh, and it's written that he was the weakest of his clan. Ironically, God chose the weakest guy to represent Israel as their judge. So let's put that into perspective. Again, God using the broken things are the lesser of things, right? They always say God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, right? So Gideon struggled with self-doubt. He clearly knew that he wasn't strong, nor was he brave, but he had faith in God and he had obedience to God, but his doubt forced him to really struggle with the calling and the task that was at hand. And I wonder how many of us struggle with our purpose in life and our calling and walking in the steps that God has called us to because we're struggling with self-doubt. The enemy likes to use our doubts, our insecurities, our fears, our worries against us, so we don't fulfill God's purpose for our life. Gideon, several times when you read the chapters, you'll see that he asked God for signs, miracles, to the point where an angel came down and even gave him a sign. God gave him as much reassurance as he needed to follow suit with his task, which was to defeat the Midianites. But the way God did it, he had a special plan, right? So when you read the text, you'll see Gideon had assembled, by the time he got enough courage to get ready to fight, he had assembled as many men as he could from Israel to combat the Midianites. And God stopped him and said, No. Tell them all to go home. Keep 300 men. God said that's all you need. And with trumpets and clay pots, they didn't even bring weapons. When you read the text, you'll see that Gideon followed suit with God's strategy. He was obedient to God's word. And even without a sword, the Midianites were delivered into the Israelites' hands. Now, it's a cool story, so if you've never read it, you definitely need to read it. In fact, I'm going to make sure it's your homework. But think about this. God used the weakest guy, the least courageous guy. He didn't even use weapons. The methods were unorthodox, but the mission still got accomplished. This is your sign, even with self-doubt, even with lack of ability, whatever insecurity you have, whatever limitation, God will use to accomplish your purpose. It's not like we get saved, we get healed, and then it fixes everything. Your character doesn't change overnight. It is the effectiveness of God's power in your life that makes the change, that heals us, that grows us, that pushes us forward. That's the purpose of faith. And if he can do it for Gideon, he can do it for you. That's why the enemy preys on these insecurities. He preys on our weak points. He wants us to feel insecure. He wants us to struggle with self-doubt. But the thing about self-doubt is we can have doubt in our own abilities. But there's a very, very, very big God who has limitless abilities. And his same spirit dwells in you. So no matter how weak we may feel, you have to harness and understand and tap into God, because no matter what limitation you think you have or doubts that you have about fulfilling your purpose or calling in God's life, it is only going to be accomplished when we rely on God's strength. As always, with reflection comes growth. First question: in what areas do you struggle with self-doubt or feel inadequate? Reflection number 2: how do you seek God's guidance or confirmation from God when you face difficult decisions in your life? Reflection number 3: God reduced Gideon's army just to 300 so that God would be credited the victory. As we rely on God, what areas of your life do you need to fully surrender and trust in God in order to get the victory in your life? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your answers.